Hey everyone, Harry here, host of Podcast Junkies. Just a little intro video for you. The quality of the video on my side didn't get recorded to what I would like it to be. So just be patient as you watch this video. It's a little bit of the same on the audio side as well, but I think the content is so good and I really want to highlight the value that Suzy provided in round two of this podcast episode. Her audio and video is pristine. For some reason, mine didn't come out so well. So it's the joys of podcasting, which I think a lot of you can relate to. So hopefully that doesn't detract from the experience you're having here. But I just want to give you a quick heads up in case you see some glitches on my side as you watch this. Thanks for watching. So Suzy Buttress, welcome back. Round two on Podcast Junkies, long overdue. Look up the exact, but it's 4 or 5 years maybe since we chatted. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me back on. I mean, it's just wonderful to speak to you and see
Yeah,
you again.
likewise. What I love to say about this format and what I've built here with the show is it's a bit selfish because it allows me to carve time out to reconnect or connect with people in the podcasting space or people that have been on the show before. And it's almost like slow down and just get into, a deeper conversation about what's happening in your world, what's on your mind. And, as much as we try to have like a social chat or a DM, life takes over. And unless we have that focused time where it's just you and I speaking, and I've mentioned this before also, like I'll go to conferences and I'll see a friend and I'll see a podcasting friend. I'm like, oh, we got to catch up. And you try to have a hallway conversation, but it doesn't work. And so I always treasure and look forward to these conversations because it's a nice way to have a meaningful conversation, it's harder and harder to have those nowadays.
Absolutely.
Bring us up to speed because obviously you've had success with your show and obviously you're still continuing with it. So what's been happening on the casual birder side? I just want to get a catch up for you and then we'll dive into what else is happening in your world.
So I still have the show and it's still my passion. I move around about what kind of episodes I'm going to release. And over the last year, I've struggled to be consistent. So I'm always trying to work back towards being consistent with my episodes. I
Yeah,
have so much material to put out, and it's just taking the time to get it organized and make sure that I'm putting out something of value to people. What we have done this year, which has been perhaps detrimental to the show, is we've actually gone out birding ever such a lot. So there
okay.
I am with a show about birds. But my only time really for creating the episodes is maybe a day during the week and then the weekends.
Yeah.
And the weekends we keep going out to see new birds or to have birding experiences. And so it leaves me very little time to do the show. So I've been recording and building up lots of experiences and lots of information for the show and then not releasing it. So at the moment, I'm feeling a bit of a fraud about being a podcaster because
Interesting.
I have my episodes, I have my backlog of episodes. I have so much that I want to share and I'm just not sharing it. So that's a tricky situation to be in at the moment. What I do have is a monthly virtual bird club for
Hmm.
listeners of the show,
Okay.
and that has been going really, really well. So we started that, I think it was a year ago now,
Hmm.
and it built up. We've consistently got around 8 to 12 people that join in each month, and it's usually the same people. So, and they're about around the world. So I've got people from Australia that join, Germany, France, in the UK, America, and Canada. So each month we all get together and talk about, what birds we've seen, what's exciting us, what's bringing us joy.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I have a guest on to talk about a particular topic. And that's going really well. And sometimes I forget that I have an audience out there that isn't just the bird club
Sure.
because I'm seeing them every month and we're, exchanging our views and our sightings. And I've actually been lucky enough to go out birding with some of them as well. And so I have to sort of remember that there's a whole load of people out there that listen to the show and aren't part of the bird club. So,
Yeah.
they're waiting for new episodes to come out. But I absolutely still love the show. I still love podcasting. And I love the connections that I'm making through the show with both other wildlife podcasters in the UK and with people around the world that are into podcasts, but not necessarily nature or birding
Yeah.
podcasts. So that's been big pluses.
So let's provide some context because obviously there's people that are going to be hearing you for the first time, seeing you for the first time here because they're just being introduced to you. So talk a little bit about the origin story, and I'll obviously have links to our longer chat about how you got started. But when you meet people and you talk about the podcast, I'm sure maybe you have it down to maybe an elevator pitch at this point. But talk about like when you started the show, why you started it, and what the original intent was for it when you kicked it off.
So I'd been a fan of listening to podcasts for a very long time.
Yeah,
And I always thought podcasts were produced by people who were famous or in the media somehow. I didn't know that regular people could produce a podcast.
yeah,
And I support a podcast company and very much love the podcast that this company produces. It's Maximum Fun, and they
yeah,
have a whole load of comedy and cultural podcasts. And I took over creating a fan space in London for Maximum Fun listeners. And so I was meeting lots and lots of people, both fans of the show, of various shows. They have about 30 shows now, a lot of shows, something for everyone. Do go and listen. But what I found out was some of those people had their own podcasts, and I was really surprised at that. And I listened to their shows, all different types. Some had audio fiction, some had opinion shows, some had interview shows. And I was really surprised at the quality of the conversations, the quality of the things that I was hearing. And it made me think, you know what? I absolutely love birds. I love being out in nature. One of my biggest joys is sharing what I find and encouraging others to go out and have awareness in nature. And the more I thought about it and the more I found out about podcasting, the more I thought, I think I'm going to have my own podcast. And, I'm an older woman, and all the people I was talking to were quite, in their early 20s,
sure.
maybe early 30s. So I was, quite a bit ahead of them in age. And it did seem like a bit of a wacky, out there thing to want to do. And I remember talking to my husband, I probably said this on the last episode because it's just one of those key moments in our family, that I was talking to him and being so enthusiastic about podcasting and what you could do and what you could talk about. And he just said to me, "But you're not going to have a show, are you?" Just because, it wasn't because he was trying to put me down or anything. It was because we're usually quite private people, and,
Yeah.
having a podcast would mean it would be public and out there.
Yes.
And I said, "Oh, no, not me." And the minute those words were out of my mouth, I thought, why not?
Why not?
Why can't I do that? And well, the rest, as they say, is history. I think it
Yeah.
was about 5 months later, I put my first episode out and haven't looked back since. I started off by just doing episodes that explained different bird species. And I
Mhm.
very much said, I mean, the reason I chose my name, The Casual Birder, is because I wanted to, well, to be honest, I felt a little bit intimidated by the fact that I wasn't an ornithologist. I wasn't a scientist. I wasn't doing research.
Yeah.
I was just someone who really loved being out in nature, really, really loved birds. So I wanted to sort of set the tone straight away. Look, I'm not an expert. I'm not going to know all the answers, but come along with me as I discover things about birds, as I go to places and record the sounds and tell you what I'm seeing. And so that's how a lot of the episodes were to begin with. And then obviously I started interviewing people about their, really interviewing either scientists or media
Mm.
people that already had a platform and were birders. And so I was bringing their stories in. And also from an early point, once I started getting listeners, bringing their stories out on the show as well. So it wasn't just all about Suzy. It's not the Suzy show,
Yeah.
but I kind of facilitate other people to tell their stories. And yes, I tell my stories too. So it's just progressed from there. Sometimes I'm through phases where I'm just doing interviews, but in the background, I'm still building up all these stories of birds that I'm seeing and experiences that I'm having. And I've been lucky enough to travel to look for birds. And so I've got, episodes that I absolutely want to release that might be a little bit old now, but it doesn't matter because those birds still exist. And
Yeah.
how I felt at the time, I recorded at the time. So it will still feel current. Yeah, I'm so excited to sort of get those episodes out as well.
You even
You
made it to
said
the
I'd have an elevator pitch ready for, and you can tell my elevator pitch, you'd need to be traveling a very long way up the building for me to talk about my show
Yeah, that's an Empire State Building elevator pitch
twice
as
over.
well. You even made it to the States to do some bird watching.
I've been really lucky. So I was able to go to Los Angeles, and twice I did that for going. The primary reason was to go to a sort of conference, well, not a conference, I don't know what you'd call it. It's been like summer camp for the people that supported Maximum Fun. So
Yeah.
it was fans of Maximum
Oh, yeah.
Fun, and we had a place up at Lake Arrowhead. And it was just a chance to sort of see some live shows, meet some of the hosts of the shows that I loved, and meet the other fans. And
Yeah.
honestly, the experiences were just amazing. I was able to go 2 years running. But the first year I went, I was able to meet a very nice person called Harry Duran, who had invited me on his show previously.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can't thank you enough for inviting me on, because when I was at the beginning of having the podcast, I did feel a bit intimidated. I was
Mhm.
putting myself out there. I had no idea whether people would like the show or not. And I was very much in awe of those people that had shows for a long time. And when you asked me to be on the Podcast Junkies the first time, it kind of gave me some legitimacy in
Of
myself.
course.
It probably didn't matter to anyone else, but for me, I thought, wow, I have been invited on someone else's show. And, I loved listening to your show as well, and listening to all your, the whole variety of people that you have on and the stories that you cover. And so I just thought, hey, I wonder if you'd be up for meeting. And you were.
Yeah, of
And it was like,
course.
oh my gosh, I've met him
Yeah.
in person. But that was such a lovely day when you came over. And I've still got the
Yeah, we had a couple
photographs of
friends meet
you.
us. We put it on social,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
our friend Eric Jules was there, Lance Anderson, an OG podcaster. It was a
absolutely.
beautiful day, and we got to do a little
Yep.
bit of bird watching. You gave us some tips. So it was just fun because I think when you do something like this and something that you're passionate about, the beauty is in like translating it to like the real world and real life. And we don't who knew like what we were in for, a couple years later. But this idea and this ability to meet people in person, we sort of took it for granted for I think a while. And after COVID, we realized how much we were missing that. But I think it's always great, and that's why I love going to the conferences to hug past guests and to say hi. But I think the fact that you were there, it just establishes that connection even more. And so I'm curious, like, you mentioned it was a valuable moment for you to talk about the show because I think that's what's helpful. And I always look for people that are doing interesting things in podcasting because it's such a wide range. And something you said earlier I thought struck me is, you wanted to differentiate yourself from like the ornithologists and the professional bird watchers. And I think people that are starting podcasting, they think too much about portraying themselves as the subject matter expert. And I had this experience with the vertical farming podcast because when I started in 2020, people were asking me like, "Do you know anything about vertical farming?" I was like, "Well, I'm interested in the topic, but I know how to interview, and and I'm going to ask high-profile people like the CEOs and founders of these companies, and then we'll sort of like I'll take my listener on the journey with me." And I sense that's sort of the modus operandi for what you were doing. Just you had a passion. You obviously still have a passion for it, and I just love the fact that you continue to find topics to talk about, birds to talk about. You would think it's something where you would quickly exhaust your subject matter, but you know, so
Not at all. Probably the same for you. You're
yeah,
always learning, you're always finding out new things, and you may even be going deeper into a topic that you've already
yes,
spoken about, because your
yes,
experiences have changed or they've got
yeah.
deeper.
And so, how do you think about where you are? Because I looked it up. That interview was published in March of 2018, which seems like
Oh my
eons
goodness.
ago. So, if you think about Susie, the podcast host, in March of 2018, and Susie, the podcast host, in December, as we're recording this, of 2024. How have you grown and how have you evolved since then?
I think I've gained a lot of
Yeah,
confidence. I'll talk to anyone when I'm out birding, and, try to encourage them. And, if the podcast comes up, because I'm
yeah,
wearing a hat with the, casual
okay,
birder on it. So, I'm going
yes,
to be advertising it. So I'm very confident about talking about the show. I still prepare my episodes. When I started, I
yeah,
scripted every episode. I scripted it in a way that is the way I speak. So it wasn't stilted, it was still going to be the way I speak. But one of the things that I learned early on from Jessie Thorne, who is the
yeah,
Max Fun head, was if you are going to script it in short sentences and absolutely do it in the voice you have, because if you try to be like Radio 4 or, some official broadcaster, you're going to trip over your words, you're going to sound unnatural. And then when people meet, in fact, actually, that does bring me on to
Hold that
something, but
thought.
I'll
Yeah.
try to keep my thought. So rather than doing it in a very officious sort of way, I think you connect with people more if they can hear you. One of the things that really surprised me about podcasting, this is the thing
Yeah.
that I was going to come on to, is I'm in person. I'm quite, well, it depends what my mood is, but most of the time I'm quite bubbly, energetic, and
Yeah.
enthusiastic. But when I was on my own doing my solo episodes from a script, I would have, friendliness in my voice and smiles in my voice, but my pace of speaking slows down. And I often thought, listening back to my show, I sound very measured and very kind of calm. And I often thought people might get quite disappointed if they ever met me in person because, on the
Yes.
show, I'm calm and everything. And then you meet me in person, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to tell you about this and that. And oh, this is fantastic. And so I'm trying to inject a little bit more of
Mm.
that into my episodes but I think it's the fact that when I speak to people, I'm worried about losing their attention. This is me psychoanalyzing
Yeah.
myself. I think I'm worried they're going to get bored with what I'm saying. So I try to
Sure.
quickly say everything so that I don't lose them. But when it's just me and a mic doing my episode, I don't think about that because I think, well, if they are bored, they'll turn it off. But they can't turn me off
Yeah.
in person without sort of
Walking
turning
away.
away
Yeah.
and walking away. So I think actually the reason I'm much slower in my delivery through my podcast is because I can't
Yeah.
see their reactions. And it's interesting, when I've done any Zoom interviews, my pacing is much more different. And,
Sure.
like today, I'm sort of, energetic and enthusiastic. And I am anyway. But if you weren't there and I was just talking into the mic, I think everything would slow right down. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong to it. It's just a different mood or a different feeling that's given. I'm still me, but I come across differently depending on what kind of episode it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think what's important is also as you sort of get your sea legs under you with podcasting, as of this recording, we're probably this is, I think, episode 360 and change or something like that. So I think what's interesting is I've become more comfortable in my own skin with these shows. And I realize that I'm just engaged with my guest. And that's the most important thing. Always conscious, obviously, of that we have a listener, a singular listener or viewer at this time who's participating in this conversation with us. And so we're always, it feels like for me, that's like keeping the energy moving of the conversation, which I always love. And I think I sense that you have more confidence in yourself as a podcaster because you put in the repetitions. And I think, I just recently ran a workshop and I was reminding new podcasters that, your 10th is going to sound better than your first, and your 50th is going to sound better than your 10th, and your 100th is going to sound better than your 50th. But you don't know that when you're starting. And I think to your point, you get worried about like what people will say. Do you feel like that sense of confidence and that your subject matter, you have an audience, you have listeners that are commenting that tell you that they love the show. And that has to be affirming for you over the years as you've grown your audience.
Oh, it really is. I mean, just recently I got an email from a listener. Well, it's actually someone who is a listener, but also a member of my bird club.
Yeah.
And, they just said how much the show means to them and how much the bird club means to them, that I've
Mm,
created this space that they feel able to come along and they're not worried about sharing what they've seen or, they just feel very comfortable with me. And honestly, that is one of the best compliments anyone could make to me, that I help them feel comfortable and that they are in a
yeah.
space where they can share their stories and not feel that they're going to be belittled or, because some of the, we're not all experts, and the people that listen to the show range from people who are complete beginners. Maybe they don't even really care about birds very much, but they've come across the show and start listening. And I've actually got listeners who are actually really expert birders, which always surprises me because I don't know how I've attracted them to the show.
Have
Obviously,
you
it's
had a
the
chance
interviews
to
that I
engage with
do.
them or maybe just ask them? Like, I mean, it's always curious. Yeah, I
I
always feel like
really,
we're talking in a vacuum sometimes. And so any sort of engagement we get or feedback from listeners or viewers, it's like gold. because we just want to know, like, what do you like about?
Yeah. No, I did try an audience questionnaire about 2 years ago to find out what people liked. I got a reasonable number of responses. I think I got about 35 responses, which doesn't sound very much, but actually, that was quite a lot because especially as I had quite a range of wants out of
Yeah,
those. So actually, I was like, oh, it's not like everyone says, please do this instead, because I would really like it. Some people like this bit and some people like that bit. So actually, what I was doing was scratching that itch for them on that particular day. But
yeah,
yeah, no, when I get emails out of the blue, or sometimes, and it happens a little bit more frequently now, I'll meet someone and they already know who I am. I don't have to tell them. I met someone in the summer who was visiting the UK from America, and I was actually out with
yeah.
my one of my listeners, Mary Lee, who was visiting from Canada, and I took her to a reserve in London. And she's lovely and
Okay,
she's so enthusiastic about the show. And as
okay.
soon as we walked in, she was like, "Oh, this is the casual birder." She was like really bigging me up. I was like, "Okay, oh, thank you." Anyway, so
That's
there's
funny.
someone who is a regular birder at that place, and he found out I was there through the visitor centre because that's where Mary Lee had, really explained that I was there. And he had a friend visiting from America, so he brought him up, and we made introductions. And then this guy said, "Oh no, I already listened to your show," and I'm like, how amazing,
Oh,
that
that's
because there
great.
are a lot of bird shows out there. It's not like there's only 3, and so it's not surprising they've heard of me.
Yeah,
So when you come across people that already know
yeah.
who you are, that's quite nice.
It is nice. Yeah, and it happens over time, and I think it's a function of people that love the show so much sharing it. And what I've heard, and as I've changed over the years in terms of like my call to action, something that I've been testing more is to say, if you're enjoying the show, share it with one person you think would get value from this. And really, it's just a small ask, but I think we just underestimate the power of people's like, it's almost like the best recommendation you can get is when someone recommends a show because they're passionate about it. They've listened to it. So they've almost pre-vetted the show for you. And so I've been really, really thinking about that. And I think that's probably some of the effect that you're experiencing where, people love the show and they personally
Absolutely.
recommend it to a
And,
friend.
we all have those times where we've said, "If you like the show, rate and review us on, wherever." But there are so many
Yeah.
listening platforms
Yeah.
now that if people do, it just ends up being scattered throughout. And it's lovely to see those reviews when they
I know.
happen. But you're right, there's
Yeah.
much more value in asking someone to just share the show with someone that you think will like it. And it still astounds
Yeah.
me now how many
Yeah.
people don't really know about podcasts. Now, there was a podcast explosion during COVID and continuing on, but there's lots and lots of people that don't listen to podcasts. And I still come across people who, aren't really sure what a podcast is. And I'm more than happy to explain, not just it because, hey, listen to my show, but because there's so many topics out there, so many amazing,
Yeah.
fantastic shows that it feels like it's such a shame to miss out on that, to have a whole area of enjoyment that you could be getting just because you don't really understand what a podcast is. So I'm still very much an advocate of, sharing what podcasting is, and it's so easy now to listen to shows. You don't have to somehow download an episode onto some little device that you used to. You can freely get it on YouTube, Spotify. Most people have got phones that will listen to
Hmm.
podcasts or share play podcasts. So, I'm still very much aware
Yeah.
that even now, 7 years on from when I started the show, there are masses of people out there that don't yet know about my show and don't yet know about podcasting. So, there's still a massive audience to reach out there.
I know. We live in a bubble sometimes, and I think we think that everyone knows about podcasting. Or obviously, if you go to a podcast conference, everyone is just inundated. But when we get out of our bubble and we realize, to your point, podcasting or even people that are into birding, like they just have not discovered it. How has your production workflow changed? Because since 2018, YouTube has just come on scene big time. Spotify is making a serious push to even compete with YouTube because now they're letting you upload a video directly there. Now they just added the ability to upload clips directly to YouTube to Spotify, which is a direct competition to YouTube Shorts. So they're really like interesting, like they want to keep people on the platform. And I'm curious how the addition of these, the ability to remote record video is getting easier and easier with tools like the script rooms like we're using today. So obviously it's shiny object syndrome sometimes as well, but how do you think about changes that are important for you as a podcaster and
Well,
which implemented
I
in your
have
show?
only done a few video interviews. I use Zoom mainly, although I have also got another platform that I'm just about to start using. And I've only actually recorded a couple of interviews that I've put out on my YouTube channel with video. The rest are all still audio. It's something I want to move into. That is an area where I still have to improve my confidence. I don't really enjoy seeing myself on film, but the good thing is when you interview someone, as when you're talking, when it's an audio interview, you put them front and center. So actually, I don't need to be in there a lot. I will cut the show so that it's mainly them talking, and I might pop in with a reaction or a question, because I think, you can hear my question without necessarily having to see me. But one of the things I really want to do, because it is so simple now to be able to reach people that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to reach previously in terms of having them as guests on the show. So when I first started, which, was all those years ago, I feel like a little old lady talking about it. But, I actually went out and traveled to people to interview them. And the technology has come on so much now that I don't actually have to meet them in person. And it gives me access to a wider range of people
Yeah.
to interview, to have on my show. Absolutely. Back to your point earlier that, you do want that human connection. So I don't want to miss out totally on meeting people, but with geography and with people's time, being able to hop on an hour's call it from the comfort of their own home is obviously a lot simpler than trying to organise, well, what day might you be available? And I'll travel up to wherever to try and meet you. So it makes it far simpler. But
Yeah.
because I'm doing that, I really ought to produce because I watch podcast interviews on YouTube. And so, as a
Yeah.
podcast listener and enjoyer, like seeing the people that are speaking. I mean, I love having them in my head because, I can get on with
Yeah.
tasks all around the house and I've got them in my head. So that's one of my main reasons for liking podcasts. But
Sure.
there's an added layer of enjoyment to seeing them and talk about, what they want. It's that whole thing about seeing the passion come through their eyes. During
Yeah.
2025,
Yeah.
that is something that I'm really going to be concentrating on, bringing the audience that different thing. They can still listen to the audio, but for those people that prefer to see video, that will be there. And one of the things that I've been doing over the last 7 years, because since I've had the show, I've become even more of a passionate birder, is taking lots of videos of different species, audio, obviously, but I'm trying to get better at videoing my wanderings around. So when I visit reserves or when I see new birds, trying to get video of them so that I could then talk about them and present that as part of a show. So whether that's talking with someone else and then intercutting with video of particular birds, but that whole production of an actual, I don't know, it's like not so much a documentary, but it's like a bit more of an immersive experience. It's like, here we are chatting,
Yeah.
but by the way, this
Yeah.
particular bird, this is, what it looks like. This is how it behaves. Now let's talk a little bit about our experience of seeing those birds. And I just think it will add an extra dimension to the two-face thing, two people, what is it, two heads together. The other thing that I'd really love to do, and I keep pushing for it and I don't
That's, yeah.
quite manage to do it, is to do some more round tables with other nature podcasters. I mean, I would love to do it with other podcasters, but I think it's really
Okay.
nice. One of the wonderful things about podcasting I've found is that people are quite supportive of each other. I think we all understand that there's a lot of audience to go around. And just because someone listens to one show doesn't mean they're not allowed to listen to another. When we look at TV
Yeah.
shows or we stream things, we can watch more than one program at a time. So, during the week, it's not like we can only watch one thing and
Yes.
not watch anything else. It's the same with podcasts. And I think we all understand that we've got an audience we can share. And if I share my audience with another podcaster, there's going to be people in my audience that have never heard their show before. So, it's bringing it to them. And it will be the same the other way around. Their audiences won't all know about me, but they can find out about me. So having like round table discussions with other nature podcasters is something I really would like to do, even if it's like a little summit where we, we all produce like individual shows, but also do some round table stuff. That's something I'd really like to do. I'm in a WhatsApp group with all of our UK nature podcasters, and it's so supportive. It's so lovely to,
Oh, okay.
have that. We've all got different shows. We've all got something, we do it differently. Some of them are paid ones, some of them are ones where, they've got resources behind them, and some of them are like me, where, my resource comes from my husband, who's my biggest sponsor, and I do it all, myself, which I still do
Yeah.
now. You know, even though we're all so different, we all support each other and we all share that love of nature and wanting to share it with people. So, yeah, honestly, I would say, even though I'm an older woman and, it's all technology and all that sort of stuff, I've always loved all that kind of thing. I feel like starting the podcast was one of the best things I could ever have done. It's really given me emotional contact with people. It's widened my knowledge of what's going on in the world just because I'm listening to podcasts and interacting with people from all different
Yes.
backgrounds. And I think before I was quite limited in the number of people, or the people that I was interacting with. And now, just me in my room with my kit, I can be in touch with so many other people and bring different viewpoints and learn from them and, just share joy. I'm always very much in the positivity
Yeah.
side of things. It's too easy to become, I
And
can be quite morose,
hated.
and I'm always looking, even for the tiniest thing, like this morning, I heard a song thrush singing outside, and it's the first time I've heard one since the spring. And or maybe the early summer, and it was just like, oh my goodness, they're back. It's starting its territory marking, and it was just a tiny, tiny little thing, but it really lifted my spirits to hear
Mm,
it and think, winter will soon be over, and we'll
yeah.
soon be, starting that whole breeding season again when they're all defending their territories and out, and that cyclical aspect of nature. I can't even remember where I started there. It was all fun and joy.
So the joy isn't really important because you have to have the joy, especially for something like podcasting, where if you're committed to it and you're doing it and it's a weekly show, you have to find the joy in these conversations, or else why are you doing it? And I repeatedly say here when I look at my calendar, and I think I've gotten better at who I invite and what I want to partake in these conversations, so that when I look at them, sometimes it may be a busy day and I feel like there's a lot going on, but I know when I connect with my guest, it's a good time and it's high vibe and it's high energy. And that's how all podcasters should feel. Like if you
Yeah,
feel like
you're
it's
doing the wrong
drudgery
thing.
and you're
Yeah.
like, why am I talking to this person when you're doing the wrong thing? And I love this idea of reminding yourself to have joy. And even, I need to be better at that because I sort of how I was raised, I come from a 9 to 5 culture and I grew up in the city, and just being here now in Minnesota, I think I've shared with you with some of the photos. We now have chickens. We have 5 chickens that we're trying to keep as warm as possible when it hits this
Yeah.
freezing temperature here in the Midwest. But even just we've got the bird feeder out and it's positioned outside the window, and my partner does an amazing job of probably spending more than she wants to on seeds and feed, but all varieties for all types of birds. But like she knows enough that if you have the variety there, then you start to see, all the different types of birds, and it's miraculous to think about
Yeah.
how they make it through winter as well, because I think it was the chickadee can sustain temperatures up to -40 Fahrenheit. Like, it's wild because I remember being here in Minnesota, I would see birds when it's like below freezing outside. And
That's
I'm like,
so
how is
tiny.
that bird
Yeah.
surviving? It's just increasing the sense of wonder. And obviously, chickens can develop like down feathers underneath their regular feathers, which keeps them warm. Because we're worried. I'm like, how are they even like sleeping overnight in the coop in this weather? So it just comes back. And then even the functional nature of the feeder, because we have cedar siding on our house and the woodpeckers were attacking for a while, but now we put a suet out and you get like these, the red-throated woodpeckers. And I forgot what the name of
The
the bigger ones, the
pileated
ones who look like Woody
woodpeckers.
Woodpecker with the red flame
Yeah.
hair.
Yeah. I
Pileated
want to
woodpeckers, they're
see one. I've
big,
never
but
seen
they're
one.
sitting here and they're part You've never seen. I'll send you a video. They were on the deck and they're just magnificent to watch, and as a child, you think of Woody Woodpecker and you're like, "Oh, wait, that's the real version." But it's interesting, if you work in tandem with nature, it can be your friend as opposed to some people who, like, hate squirrels or hate birds because 'cause they're damaging, and I noticed that there's less of the pecking on the house now that we've put the suet out for the woodpeckers. And so you just have to find the balance because, I'll hang like a fake owl on the side of the office where I'm at, and that keeps the woodpeckers away too. So it's just a reminder. I think what came to mind as you were speaking is just like the fact that you're constantly wowed by nature, and that never ends as long as you set yourself to receive that joy, to receive that wonder every day.
One of the things that I've learned over the course of my show from the contact that I've had with other people, other birders, is that there's more than one way to enjoy birds. And actually, there's a very long list of the ways that you can enjoy it. There's people that do mindful birding. So they will just
Mm,
sit and just appreciate the birds that are around them. They're not running off to find a new bird. They're just in the moment, listening, watching, calming.
yeah,
There are people that just listen to birds, they're bird listeners. And, so you don't have to be just one type of birder. We'll all have different types of birding that we do at different
yeah,
times. And, when I'm working, I'm always listening for birds. And, if one that I've not seen for a while, I can hear it outside. I am right there at the window looking out to see, what's come. But yeah, that really, really opened my eyes a bit, because I really just thought, oh, you're either a birder or maybe a twitcher. So this is someone who races off after rarities and will travel
oh,
vast distances just to be able to tick off a rarity. And I think in the UK, we've kind of thought, well, that's just the two types. You've got the old grandpa type who wanders around and tells you about what birds are out there. And then these ones that are spending fortunes and, flying here, there and everywhere. But, and I think it was contact with American birders that made me realize that there's so many more ways
mm,
to enjoy being out in nature and to enjoy birding. And
yeah,
that's, again, one of the things that I want to bring to the show, to let people know you don't have to fit a carbon, a cutout version of what a birder is.
sure.
Birding is whatever it is you're doing. And
Mm,
however you enjoy the birds, that's a valid way
yeah,
to be a birder, you know.
yeah,
And sometimes just sit and listen and watch what's around. And, if there's a rarity that sounds like it's in good condition and isn't going to be stressed by loads of people going to see it, I might travel, not long distances. We set ourselves a limit on how far we travel. But, I have gone to see birds we had a northern water thrush in one of the counties at the beginning of the year near us. Well, it wasn't actually near us, it's over the other side of the country, but it's where my parents lived. And we just happened to be on a
okay.
visit to my parents. So
Oh,
it was
okay,
close to where they live. So that was fair. I was allowed to do that sort of twitch.
sure.
But yeah, I mean, we go out all over the county now, and I've found out so many more habitats just from this year. We decided we would try to see 200 bird species in the year. It's kind of
Oh,
like a round number. In America, you have
yeah,
so many more birds than we do, but 200
yeah,
is quite a large number for a year's list. And, so that we were going out to different habitats, and we've found so many more lovely places that we just would not have found. And
yeah.
sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes you go to those places and you see lots of different birds. And other times you go and it's just a country walk because, the birds aren't around for whatever reason. It's the time of year, time of day, but, you're out, and I
And that's
think
okay
that's,
too.
like, really important.
Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. You've gone out. It's so easy just to sit home and just sort of stay in your safe space,
yeah.
but, going out into nature can be your safe space too.
I love that. Talk to me about the bird club because I think that's interesting for podcasters who want about engagement, community, maybe even monetization. So just bring us up to speed where you're at with what's working for your show.
So I think that I, once again, lacked confidence in what that would be. So I didn't monetize it from the beginning, and I think I probably should have done, because now I've got these people regularly coming, and I get as much from these bird clubs as they do, and I don't think I can monetize it, because what would I do? I'd have to say, okay, you lot are all grandfathered in because you're already here. But then how will I attract new people? Because they know that there's people that are already enjoying it that don't pay or didn't
Yeah.
pay, or the whole monetization thing. Just at times, I think I've got the hang of how this will be. And at other times, I think I just don't know how to do it at all. So one of the things I am going to be doing, and I've spoken to a few of my listeners about this, is, so currently I have a Facebook group
Mhm.
for listeners of the show. It's a closed group, so you have to be a listener to join it,
How
and we
many people
keep
in the
it
Facebook
very,
group?
I think it's about 300,
Okay,
but
that's good.
obviously you only have
Yeah,
about 25 or 30 people that
sure.
actively, although for all I know, there could be a lot more reading all the posts, but they don't respond. They
Lurkers.
don't take part. Exactly, lurkers. Not, I've done my fair share of lurking in Facebook groups myself.
Yeah.
Getting more and more frustrated by the way Facebook operates.
Mm.
And I find that I can get a notification and it says things like, there was this post 5 days ago, you might want to comment on it. And I actively go into my group and look for new posts and,
Yeah.
keep an eye on what's going in there. And I totally miss these posts. And then I find out 5 days later and I feel awful because I want my people in the group to feel like, I notice them, I
Yeah.
notice what they're saying.
Yeah.
And, there's lots of lovely interaction between people, but I'd hate for them to think I'm ignoring them. And
Sure.
I'm not,
Yeah.
it's not showing it.
Yeah.
And also, the frustrating thing about the way the group operates is it's very hard to have a conversation going on. So, for example, sometimes people will say, who's got a tip about kit or something like that? And,
Mhm.
there'll be an active thread for, a couple of days. And then, of course, it drifts down as more things get posted.
Yeah.
And then you can't find it again. And not everyone is heavy enough to be able to do a search to find a keyword
Sure.
or whatever. So we're going to be moving to, we'll keep the Facebook group there because there are people that are very comfortable on Facebook, and I
Sure.
wouldn't want to take away the show from them like that, the community from them. But I'm going to be moving to a platform which is more like sort of you can have threads or
What's the name of
topic
it?
areas and then threads. Circle, I think
Circle.
yeah,
I had a feeling you were gonna say Circle. I'm
yeah,
in several Circle groups, and it seems to be picking up because it's very once you're in one, it's easier to just get in others because
yeah,
and it you can do threads, you can do
exactly.
different sections, you can have teaching content in there. It's making a lot of traction, so I'm not
Yeah, and
surprised.
I'm in a couple of circle groups, so I've seen how it works, and
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
that would work really well for my community.
Yeah.
So what I'm planning is we're going to have some founder members from the group, from the listeners,
That's
who
great.
will assist me in buying the first year's license because,
Yeah.
all this money I keep paying out on the show, and I'm not getting
Yeah.
any in, so I have to,
Yeah.
think about that. But then what I think I'll be doing is having a paid membership. And it will be so much more valuable than the Facebook group. Yes, people will have to migrate over to, but I've spoken to people in my group and there's an appetite for it. There's definitely an appetite for things like
Mhm.
trip reports and being able to,
Yeah.
use resources that other people have shared and then go back and find them again. And I just think the organization of the threads makes a lot more sense. So I still have to think about how that monetization will work. I think over the Christmas period, I'll be doing lots of reading of help articles from Circle about how you set these things up. And because, you want people to have the opportunity to try it before committing. But I'd also like to keep it quite low level cost so that,
Yeah.
it's not prohibitive to people. So it's
And I
working
think you
out
can do pricing that's maybe founders pricing, $5 a month or something, very simple, but j as a
exactly.
way to thank the people who have been with you on this journey, but then also, you know, move that up to $10 a month for new members or 15, whatever people find reasonable. I think the $10 price point is probably helpful for people who are, doing this out of a passion. But then you then can provide additional value, whether it's like, hey, I'm doing Ask Me Anything, once a month where it's just for members. And it's like,
Yes.
and I think people, they have this adage in marketing and sales. They say when people pay, they pay attention, because there's been so many instances of like people gifting you access to a free course or to a paid course and they're like, "Hey, have my login," and then you didn't pay for it, so you don't really like feel like
Value it.
the necessity, the value it. Yeah, no, so
Yeah.
I think, and I do feel we're in an age where this abundance mindset, this idea of currency is current, and you have to give it and you have to exchange it. So you have to welcome it in when it's coming, and you also have to be feeling like you're providing something where it's okay to be compensated for it. And I think because
Yeah.
of you've done the podcast for so long and so many years, and people the free content is the podcast, right? And they can listen and but now like, hey, do you want to go deeper? And I think that'll be interesting to see what happens because that'll be your call to action now in the podcast, right? Hey, we've got a group now and this is what's happening in the group and feel, people will get a little bit of FOMO and feel like, oh, maybe I like the podcast and let's see. There's always the people that want to go deeper, right? And so having that I think is going to be great.
Yeah, no, I'm hopeful that is I mean, I've been talking about it for a couple of years, but, 2025 is the year of action. So, I
Yeah,
was talking
that's good.
to some of my club members recently and, they were really showing an appetite for it. So I thought, well, it's not just coming from me trying to
That's good.
drag people into coming to this other platform. There's actually an appetite for it,
Yeah,
and, I think this is the time.
that's good. Well, if you need some accountability, I'll check in with you in a text chat and see where you're at.
Okay. Ooh, scary.
Well, I think it's obviously that's why coaches, gym coaches, they push you to do the things that sometimes, you wouldn't do if it was just you. And sometimes people need that motivation. So
Absolutely.
it's something that, it's top of mind for me. I'm always interested in that. And even myself, like, having this show, I really don't monetize this show at all. And I always think about ways to like get more engagement. And so it's always interesting to see hear what people are doing because it inspires me to think differently about what I want to do in 2025. I did make the move to video, so that's been helpful. But there are other things. And so it's always helpful to be in a conversation with other podcasters who have the same motivations, and then so I
Yeah.
think that's rising tide lifts all boats. So as we get close to wrapping up, on staying true for the context of the show, I'll ask my two questions again and see if your answers have changed. But the first one is that what's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Oh gosh. I'm obviously a stick in the mud and never change my mind about anything. I think actually it's this idea of there being more types of ways of birding. I know I'm sticking to birding, but
Yeah, yeah, no,
it
it's okay.
opened my eyes to there's a group called Birdability, and they are advocates for people with disabilities being able to get out into
Oh,
various
wow.
reserves, making sure they're accessible for wheelchairs, providing information and advice to people who, you know, have some sort of challenge that they need to accommodate if they want to go birding. And they on
Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, they provided this long list of ways you can bird. And to see it down in black and white and think about actually, yes, we're all different types of people. We all have different challenges. We all have different loves or wants or needs. And all
Yeah.
of these ways are valid. And it opened my eyes a bit to, maybe some people enjoy birds by just listening. Maybe some people enjoy birds because by creating art around them. That's their way of they don't
Hmm.
keep lists,
Hmm.
they don't tick birds off, but they're inspired by birds and they create art or poetry or write about them. It's just other ways of experiencing birds. And all of that, they're all still birders because they're all that same source is the birds around us. And of course, there's people who are really passionate about conservation, really go out there and put
Hmm.
their money where their mouth is kind of thing. They are out there doing the work.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think realizing that we don't just use binoculars and scopes and, you know, welly boots, to go out birding. There are other ways to
Yeah.
enjoy the birds. So that's something
That's
yeah,
great. I love that. And what's the most misunderstood thing about you?
I don't know, maybe that I'm a know-it-all because I always have an opinion about something. But, I
Yeah.
am actually I suppose I'm quite an insecure person and I try to get over that. I don't think people would think of, someone with insecurity or not being confident when they speak to me or encounter me in every day. I
Yeah.
think not that I want to be known as someone who's insecure and not confident, but, they are just parts of me.
That's important as a distinction because I think I've noticed that as a common thread that people say that I'm more introverted than you would think by listening to me on the podcast. And I think I'm the same way. And I think what I thought for a while that I was an extrovert, but I'm a situational extrovert. And so I'll go to a podcast conference and 2 or 3 days, and then I'm just like mentally taxed. And I come back and now that we lived outside 30 minutes outside the city, and I realized, like, I need to work harder to maintain connections, to go out and do things that are in the real world. I can't live my whole life, through a screen, and as much as I've been able to connect to, like you said, have conversations, expand my worldview horizon by speaking to people across this planet, which has been wonderful and fascinating, I do have to balance that with some IRL, as they say, in real life connections. I
Yeah,
think I found that over the years because the dynamic when you're engaging with people in real life is different than just like us having this conversation. You need different skill sets, and you need to be able to be. It's almost harder to be engaged in real life because there's so many other distractions,
absolutely.
and sometimes. I've had the mistake of the challenge of being a New Yorker moving to the Midwest is I'm focused with my blinders. Like I don't say hi to people. Like I don't smile. Like it's different because in New York City you do that. You're a weirdo. So I've had to learn as a being here. People are just friendlier here. You have to open up. You have to be genuinely engaged in what people are saying. You have to be okay with like 10-minute goodbyes and just have patience for different cultures and just have an appreciation for we're all trying to connect on the human level, and I think that's what we need more of. And I think COVID showed how really lonely people are and how disconnected from other human beings people are. So I appreciate that you said that, and I think it's just a reminder that it's something that we all have our own insecurities. We all have the things that we see when we look in the mirror, and I think as long as we recognize them and we're constantly working to improve them, I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
So thank you so much for making the time to come back on. It was so nice to reconnect with you.
Oh, so
It's
much for
always nice to
asking
hear
me.
what you're up to. And just to see the progress with your show is so inspiring to know that you could take a topic like birding and just, run with it and make it your own. Literally, like, don't be dependent on what other people's perceptions of what if you thought of what a show would be, if you thought back when you started the show 7 years ago, like I'm going to start a show and I envision this is what's going to be. I'm sure it's wildly different than what it is now as you've experienced it. But if you had waited for like all the perfect storm of things to happen so you could start it, it wouldn't have happened and it wouldn't be the wonderful show that it is today. Open up all these doors and all these people that love and support you in the show. So kudos for you for taking that first step, for continuing and just continuing to, develop the show in your own way with your own personality. And I think that's what makes it so special.
Oh, thank you so much, Harry. Thank you.
Where's the best place for folks to connect with the show and to learn more about what's happening in your world?
Well, you can go to my website, casualbirder.com. On the front page,
Okay.
it's got the latest episode, which I will say is a few months old at the moment. There are more
Okay.
coming, but there are
Yeah,
130 odd episodes there. So, there's plenty to keep you
that's right.
occupied in the meantime. And there's also links on there if you are interested in joining the Bird Club. You'd be very welcome.
Yes.
And, people who are just finding out about birds, if you want to come along and just be in an environment where other people are talking about them, we've all range of experiences, so don't feel intimidated. We're very, very welcoming. There's the Facebook group as well. And I'm on Instagram. So I do try to post a little bit more about the birds I'm seeing on Instagram. And I try to ask people to think about what birds have given them joy and let me know. I genuinely
Mm,
love hearing from people what birds they've
yeah,
seen, especially when they're birds in countries that I don't know. But,
yeah.
I genuinely love hearing from people and hearing what their bird experiences have been. But yeah, casualbirder.com is the main place to go.
Okay. We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes as well. Thanks again for your time, Susie. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks so much, Harry. It's been lovely speaking with you again.